All right, we're live. Mary, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Randy. It's good to see you today.
Yeah, likewise. So this is, I guess, full disclosure, kind of our first experience together. I've known of Mary for so long, ever since we started doing sales community. Just one of those people I want to connect to. So I'm so glad that Outreach were able to bring us together today.
Yeah, me too as well. It's really great to be with you, Randy, and likewise.
Perfect. So you are, I guess, pretty recent at Outreach, starting in March, is the Global Innovation Evangelist. So it'd be definitely great to maybe hear a little bit more of that about your role. And you've got a diverse background. You've taught, you've had operating roles, Forrester Consulting, undergrad, most importantly, in Boston at BU. And your musicology. It'll be interesting to see how you went from that into the dark side of sales.
It is quite a story. Probably best done over a beer someday. But I'm happy to give the audience a quick snippet of my background. But yeah, I'm the global innovation evangelist at Outreach, and I've been with the company for 8 months now. And interestingly enough, I followed Outreach as well as a number of others in the category really closely as an analyst at Forrester. I was a principal analyst there for 6 years, where I basically covered the emergence of the sales technology landscape. I started right in 2015, which sort of is the time that sales tech above and beyond CRM started to really burgeon. And so I had a great bird's eye view of the birth of so many different companies, whether it was Allego, which is also in Boston, or HighSpot, or Seismic, or, and then naturally Outreach was a little bit of a newer player in that landscape. But I was at Forrester as an analyst for 6 years and followed basically the sales technology landscape. I looked at the future of buying and selling in the business context. And another piece of my platform was diversity, equity, and inclusion within the B2B sales world.
Fantastic, really important, and I know that was one of your top 5 predictions that will continue to improve going forward. So maybe it's a whole different topic in another time. So we could probably do a whole string of podcasts here. But anyway, this whole I'm for lack of better words, kind of old school. Reality is 2 years ago I knew nothing about all this as a prior sales leader and CEO. I'd always be upset about saying, hey, you can get all this data great in the rearview mirror. It's hard to get going forward. How do you get the right connections and sales, intelligence around everything else? And I don't mean this just to be a commercial for Outreach, but just the whole space is amazing. So maybe starting off, you can talk a little bit about what is engagement and intelligence in the sales world.
Yeah, so it's essentially, so for the people who've been really following the sales technology marketplace, that there's been a number of different categories. So we've had, sales content, sales engagement, which really looks at the activity and interactions between buyers and sellers across the revenue cycle. You've got revenue intelligence and operations. So revenue intelligence is the automatic data right back into CRM of, all those activities that are happening. And then RevOps is really looking at the deal management, pipeline management, forecasting. And so, early last year when I was still at Forrester, we were really looking at this category creep across a range of different, categories and micro categories within the sales technology landscape. And sure enough, there's been massive consolidation and innovation that's been going at a breakneck pace. So the way I really think about engagement and intelligence is engagement is really all of the critical interactions that buying teams and selling teams will have across the entire life cycle of the customer. And when you think about that, all of that interactions, whether it's when does a prospect want to engage, what channel do they prefer, how do you want to personalize, what message is going to work better, to what kind of content are they reading and downloading and sharing, and how are they doing that? When you start to think about the capture of all of that activity data, which we call, buyer behavioral data, and also at Outreach we look at sentiment data. It's not just, who opened your email. It's like, what was the sentiment and the response back? And then what you can do is apply all of those signals to your pipeline deals and forecasts so that you're getting much better intelligence. And so that's a simple way of really thinking about engagement intelligence. A lot of companies are looking at revenue intelligence, revenue operations. It's been kind of the darling of the sales technology world for the last several months. But without that signal data and those rich data sets that the system captures with automation, you're really kind of flying blind. So we're in a new world, and you kind of talked about historical trending. And when you think about the world that we're in, where it's highly volatile, there's a lot happening on the global economic front, as well as social, political, and now we're dealing with the Omicron virus, which is really spreading across the states here and elsewhere. Revenue leaders can't really look backwards to understand what's going to happen anymore, because we've never faced this. So that's where sort of this real-time ability to understand your deals, your pipelines, and your forecasts based on buyer behavioral signals and sentiment is becoming absolutely crucial for organizations to run their business with agility and accuracy.
That's great. And with those categories that you mentioned, there's kind of, I guess, what I'd call kind of category creep as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Forrester's been following it, Gartner's been following it, and what we're seeing is lots of M&A activity. We're also seeing less funding on the venture side from early stage sales tech companies. So now there's a sense that kind of the winners have been figured out, and those winners, and certainly I'm proud to be a part of Outreach, because I think we are one of those winners. They're big platform providers, which are now acquiring other companies, adjacent companies, and also doing their own internal innovation, so that there's a platform that sits on top of CRM from which your entire revenue organization can operate efficiently, effectively, and get tremendous insights and intelligence from the large data sets that we're capturing through automation.
Yeah. So this is kind of new technology and really kind of differs from kind of CRM, what I call kind of traditional sales technologies, correct? Actually, probably even useful. So as opposed to maybe kind of reporting the news, this helps make the news.
Yeah, I love that, actually. Yeah, I'm going to have to write that down. So yeah, I mean, CRMs, is, when you think about pipeline management, forecast management, whatever, it's very much a historical trending system. The other problem with CRM is that nobody used it, at least on the sales side, right, Randy? Because it wasn't.
But they didn't want to use it.
They didn't want to use it, and it's been really difficult prior to automation and automatic data write back, which we now have through revenue intelligence. But sellers never wanted to use it because it wasn't really designed for them. It didn't map to their workflows, and it's kludgy. And so CRM, was really pretty much the only show in town until 2015 on the sales tech stack side. And now, you have all of these sales technologies that are following the way of marketing, which is creating better efficiencies, personalization, and intelligence. Marketing is just looking at it one-to-one, and in the sales world, it's one-to-one, or marketing's one-to-many, sales is one-to-one. Right. So, I think we start to see CRM play a different role as we move forward, and most of the analysts that I talk to on a daily basis sort of see that, and I think the Salesforce and Microsoft and some of the other players see that as well.
Yeah. Now, what did you say? And you said automated data write back?
Yeah, automatic data write back. So, when I was a CRO, you mentioned a previous operator was like 10, 15 years ago. I used to have like the Salesforce, Salesforce Fridays, right? Where you'd be like, all right, nobody does anything for 3 hours except make sure the data is, you're manually entering in all of the data in the system, because I couldn't forecast effectively. I couldn't do my job. I couldn't communicate with the CEO and the board unless I had complete data. And so at that time, I actually had to write into the comp plans that I was going to actually fire people who weren't, compliant with CRM and all of that kind of stuff. Today, thank God, sellers don't need to do that. They don't need to do data entry, and all of this can be captured by the system with automation.
Wow, that's crazy. So for those watching along, feel free to chime in with any comments or questions. This is, I don't say not quite the wild, wild west, but Outreach has done a great job in certainly taming things. Now, what about some examples of how data becomes actionable to actually improve team performance?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great examples, whether, you're a rep, whether you're pre-sale, post-sale, whether you're a manager, or even a RevOps leader or CRO. But, if I think about sort of at the individual contributor level, Once you're able to capture these data sets, you can start to get recommendations. And, I don't think the recommendations are ever intended to take the seller out of their role. I think that's a really important role, but the AI and machine learning can provide and surface recommendations. So if you're at a certain place in the sales cycle, talking to a certain persona at a certain type of company, the machine learning can surface up what is an appropriate piece of content to share with someone, as an example. If you're engaging with someone across LinkedIn or other social channels, the AI can overlay on top of that individual's profile and immediately surface to the seller what that person is interested in and start to recommend content. In our system, we have the AI can recommend what type of channel or time or messaging is going to resonate with a unique individual based on their understanding and learning of that individual. And then at the manager level, we have a solution that's part of our platform called Kaya, which is an intelligent virtual assistant or conversation intelligence tool, very similar to some of the tools that perhaps are better known out there to the audience, but it does capture through natural language processing, the entirety of the conversation and provide that reporting and analytics back to sales management. But what it also does that's different from other solutions is it allows the seller, for example, to evaluate their talk time relative to others on the meeting. How important is that when you think about the 80-20 rule, which I know is always tough for sellers to crack the code, so they can see real time, should I back off and ask more questions? Should I listen more? Or should I lean in if I'm not being as demonstrative as I could be? It also surfaces up real-time enablement cards based on questions or prompts that the buyers have asked. And then it also allows your sales manager to listen in and to provide real-time coaching. So those are some things. And then, at the senior level, I think we'll get to a world where forecasting is more of a science rather than an art. That was one of my predictions for 2022, where you're really looking at this buyer signal data and sentiment data across the entire pipeline to start to really inform which deals are tracking, which ones are off track, how your forecast is, and more importantly, being able to course correct before that one lost deal report comes across your desk. You mentioned being sort of old school. Well, yeah, I was too when I was a CRO, and you'd find out everything sort of after the fact and be like, okay, well, we lost that deal, but we can try to solve that problem next quarter.
Yeah. Where you have to spend all the all the manual time and kind of digging into it all. All right, we've got a question here from Colette. Thank you, Colette. Who would you say are the top 2 AI companies that you've seen so far? And I guess relevance could be AI overall, maybe the C3 AI or data robot type, but I would assume it's more relative to the sales and marketing tech stack. Yeah, and if you're being set up for any questions here, you don't have to answer.
No, I certainly agree with you, but I've been following UiPath for a really long time, so super interesting company. In the sales technology space, certainly I think Outreach is leading the charge. Another company I think does a really great job is 6 Sense, more focused on the marketing or CRM persona versus the CRO and sales persona that we're focused on here at Outreach. But those are a couple ones that I follow pretty closely.
That's great. Colette, thank you. And again, for any others, feel free to chime in with any comments or questions as well. So I just want to go back. You're talking about on the rep side. So when you talked about helping them with what channel, can you explain what you mean by channel?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, our platform helps every member of the revenue organization manage their omnichannel interactions. And so, when you think about where we are today, and certainly COVID just accelerated the digitization of the go-to-market process. That we've been talking about that, Randy. But now, we're in a world where interactions are happening in text. They're happening in synchronous and asynchronous video. They're happening across social platforms and email and even direct mail with, Sendoso and all those other kind of things that you can link into your system. So, I think that just being able to follow and track all of these different channels. And so what our system is able to do is understand, and others as well, understand preferences for buyers. So they tend to be more responsive at this time of the day across this type of a channel. And so that just enables you as a seller to engage in a way that makes sense for your buyer, which is basically what they want.
Wow. It's amazing all this that's available. And why'd you say that now's the time to invest? Obvious question. Why is the time now to invest in your tech stack?
Yeah, so it's a really important
You don't
time.
want to get fired? That could be one.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I guess I'll answer that question by giving you an observation back, which is when I was at Forrester, the companies, prior to the pandemic, the companies that had invested in really doing gap analysis on their sales tech stack and understanding where the big gaps were, or even if they had duplicative point solutions in place, which is also a common problem, and put in the top tier technologies, we're in a really good position when COVID hit to be able to pivot, transition really quickly, whether it was to have the data to know how your sellers are interacting and engaging with customers, or being able to pivot quickly to virtual events and meetings like we're doing today, that sort of thing. The ones that hadn't made that investment because they were, we have a relationship building business, we have a traditional sales force, our people want to meet in person. Well, they were scrambling because now, they were scrambling because how are you going to actually enable your sales force if you don't have these platforms and technologies to support digital and remote interactions? I think there were some very traditional leaders who maybe said, hey, well, we're going to wait this out, and 6 months, 9 months, 10 months, we'll go back, we'll be meeting everybody in person. And I think the Omicron virus has showed us that we just aren't in control of the situation. So you better have the right technologies in place so that people can work anywhere, anyhow, and across every channel.
Yeah. So on the one hand, you have a lot of businesses now that, the Mark Robert's PLG, product-led growth, where that kind of heavy lift, relationship kind of isn't that big of a deal. But then you still have a lot of the traditional, maybe more enterprise, sales efforts that, traditionally you need kind of something of a relationship. You need that face-to-face. It's the kind of know me, like me, trust me.
Right.
So for those that kind of don't have that, then presumably a lot of the sales tech stack helps. But any other kind of words of wisdom that you'd have, especially that, those are probably the younger sellers.
Yeah, and I don't want to go against one of my favorite guys, Mark Roberge out there. Is a brilliant leader and does amazing things for the sales community. And there's been a lot of buzz about PLG, right? And I think certainly there are companies where that makes sense. But if it truly were that easy, Randy, companies would be just, coming out with the perfect messaging, putting all their, their catalog on the web, and everyone would just come and buy it, right?
Yeah.
But salespeople get paid a lot of money, and there's a reason for it. And when you think about B2B purchases, they're highly emotional purchases, even if it's not a huge dollar value, but careers are made and broken with the right partnerships you make within the B2B world. So I really do see the seller's role as being crucial and important in B2B sales in most cases. But yeah.
No. And I know one of your predictions was that sales managers get the enablement that they deserve, but I would almost turn around to say that finally, these enablement people are, kind of, there's that, that old cartoon that, the people are fighting with bows and arrows. And I'd almost, it's analogous to the sales enablement person saying, hey, not talking about guns, but hey, I have a gun, versus the bow and arrows of, whatever fighting might be going on. So I almost view it more as that the enablement people are kind of getting their day that they deserve.
Yeah, the enablement people are definitely getting the day that they deserve. And I predicted that like 3 years ago. I wrote a report called The Future of Sales Enablement is the C-Suite. And in that report, I anticipated that this role of enablement was going to be more and more front and center, potentially even a role where they had a C in front of their title, or they reported into the C-suite. And I think back in the day, when we were leaders, Randy, and I don't mean to be disparaging in any way, but enablement almost was just like all the stuff that you didn't want to do as a CRO, right? And you're just right. Like, let me just give that to somebody else to handle. Well, today, because the buyer is evolving at such a rapid pace, the buyer is so independent, self-sufficient, not following a linear journey, And the time that you get in front of that buyer as a salesperson to influence that buying decision is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, so that when you get, that at bat, or to use a different analogy, your time on stage, right? You can't afford not to maximize it. And so we're seeing the research that I just conducted with Forrester that CROs are heavily investing in internal sales enablement, external firms that have specialty capabilities that they might bring in as well. And they're investing heavily both in the individual contributor and your first and second line manager. So I think that's really terrific.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, we got a question here from Rick. Thank you, Mary. I'd like to hear more about how the outreach platform creates that distinction between art versus science within the sales process. And does your technology obsolete sales methodologies such as obviously they're complementary and make each other better and stronger, but all yours.
Wow. I mean, I'm wondering if this person is an analyst, because there's multi-dimensions to this question. It's actually a really good question. So thank you for asking it, Rick. Let me start with the first part of the question, which is, I really believe that sales is a combination of art and science. And when I was selling and when I was leading, I definitely leaned more into the art of it and the gut and the instinct, because we didn't have the data and we didn't have the tools, right, beyond CRM. And so now there are these sophisticated tools that look at, that grab all of this buyer signals, that can give you intent information, that can provide recommendations. And so now we're in a world where I think the top sellers and leaders will start to lean more into the science, particularly as you look at forecasting, because it's a pretty flawed process. My research has shown across many different organizations of all shapes and sizes. So I think top leaders and sellers are going to start to lean more into the science of selling. But I want to be clear to say that the art never goes away. Like the AI and the bots, they're cold. Someone told me that the other day on one of my podcasts. So you need to overlay your experience, your expertise, and your art, for lack of a better word, on some of those next step actions. You don't have to immediately just do what the AI suggests. It's options. It's providing more educated options. So lean more into the science, but don't ever lose the art. That's my advice. In terms of the obsolescence of some of the sales methodologies, it's funny because I wrote a wave on sales methodologies, and I really wanted to understand how some of these top selling methodology companies, whether it's Medic or Challenger or Value Selling, or there's a million of them out there, we're adapting towards a more evolved buyer and highly evolved digital process. And some are and some aren't. I don't think our technology takes away the need for a methodology. I've become less and less focused on a unique methodology. I'm feeling like there's less differentiation across the board, but I do believe every company needs a methodology, a framework, a common language and vocabulary. And what we're seeing is that companies like HighSpot and Seismic are embedding those sales methodology principles and frameworks into the technology. So that's what I see happening. I see the principles being embedded into some of these technology solutions to provide greater reinforcement. That's the biggest challenge with these sales training things. Everyone comes to the sales kickoff, you get trained for 3 days, you retain 10 to 20% of what was shared, and then you go on, right? But if you can embed these concepts into the technology that sellers are using day to day, I think that's even better. And so that's where I think we're going directionally. And then I also think some of these players like the Challenger or Medic or whatever understand that there needs to be a strong technology platform component to what they do. And so they're all partnering up with others or potentially building their own technologies as well. So I don't think it goes away, just looks in a little bit of a different format.
There you go. It probably makes their methodologies, I'd say, that much stronger and better, because you're able to take advantage of it to a certain degree. Rick says,
"Oh, good. Okay, Rick. I'm glad."
That's great. Now, one thing there you mentioned was the concept of value selling. So that's obviously kind of on the one hand been around forever. The other hand is, kind of more important. You can sell more faster, higher value, all that. Do you have any perspectives on value selling?
Sure. I mean, I think what we're seeing, my research shows across the board is that buyer expectations just continue to rise, right? And I don't see that changing. So there's some pretty significant demographic shifts. Millennials are half the global workforce. They have C's in front of their titles. They're economic decision makers. They're not just people who are surfing together lists and doing research. And these folks are just, super comfortable using technology. So, um, you know, I think, I think that's where we're going.
Yeah, that's great. Well, as we get toward the end here, so what's your, I guess, some of the takeaways or messages that you would like to bestow? Obviously, you have, to be like the fortune cookie would be get outreach. It can solve most of your problems and opportunities. But
Well,
what
yeah, I
other?
mean, I don't spend my time doing that. We have a lot of people on the sales side and the marketing side who talk
I'll do
about
that.
that. Yeah, but I think what my research shows is that the role of the seller, the manager, and the CRO is dramatically changing. And so the words of wisdom for the audience here would be embrace those changes. Don't sit by the sideline and get passed by. And so when I ask CROs, what is the most important attribute or skill that a sales manager is going to have, the answer they gave me was the ability to consume data and analytics and act on that. So when I was a sales manager, it would have been probably the ability to coach somebody, right? And so, you're really seeing some differences. When I ask sales leaders, what's the most important skill for a rep? They say their ability to use technology and data. So I think, the biggest piece of advice I would give the audience is, start to really understand how technology can change your game. Make sure you're staying conversant on data and how to lead with an insights-driven approach. And for your sales leaders, make sure that you're very strong with your financial acumen, because I'm starting to see that role become more operationally focused versus, how it was when I used to be a CRO.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll just kind of chime in a couple other things. I could also envision that, it's not just, sales level discussion, but as you said before, kind of a board level discussion, and eventually some of these tools and analytics, the old days and even now, sales can kind of shield some of that information and kind of swizzle how they want. But given kind of technology, I mean, everything's going to, everybody's going to be looking kind of almost, at the same information. So there's going to be, full kind of transparency as to kind of where everything's at, right?
Yeah, so you were talking about, ROI and total economic impact studies. So, what buyers want when they actually interact with salespeople or managers is they want high degree of personalization. They want meaningful and valuable interactions because they've done all this other stuff on their own and they'll continue to do it on. So you are seeing things like, the ability to navigate a total economic impact discussion being really important. So things of that nature, I think, will become more and more important as we move forward.
Wow, it's amazing, really, really interesting. And then talking about the evolving role of the CRO, and I've got lots of people at advisory board, sales community. So it used to be it was a swim lane of kind of just VP of sales. Now there's all these other kind of go-to-market aspects, and a lot of them are kind of leaning on marketing, so to speak, to say, "Wow, you have all this money. MQLs are nice. It should be SQLs, and kind of what's that accountability?" Do you foresee that kind of sales and marketing function more and more comes together under one true kind of go-to-market revenue leader, could be sales or marketing, or do you see them continuing to be kind of separate report-ins?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great comment. And I actually see more and more coming together between the two functions. And there's a couple of reasons why. One is organizations are starting to operate off of this singular set of customer data. Back in the day when I was doing it, marketing had its data, product had its data. I had my data as a CRO. So now with the emergence of the RevOps role and some of the tools that are out there, like Outreach and specifically our Commit tool, companies are starting to operate off of the single data set. And RevOps is, sales ops is reporting into them, marketing ops, and customer success ops. So I think that's really helping to bring the two functions together. Also, as buyers do more on their own, it's going to be, as I said, smaller amount of time that you have a chance to influence them. So you need less and less people. And, finally, I think that, we will see, and I'm hearing this, that marketing is reporting to CROs, or marketers are becoming CROs. So I don't think there's not going to be the shootout where one wins or the other wins or the other loses. It's not, sort of so black and white, but it's more of like the person who's running the revenue engine has to be data savvy, financially savvy, and they have to understand all of the different channels. Like direct sales is just one channel out of a partner ecosystem, e-commerce, marketplaces, right? And so more and more, you're going to see one person on the hook for all of that revenue, because buyers don't buy in siloed channels anymore, in siloed routes to market.
Yeah, fantastic. Anyway, all right, we're pretty much at our time. So Mary Shea from Outreach, Global Innovation Evangelist. Very impressive. I'm sure we're going to come up and do this a few more times next year. Lots of great nuggets and a lot of other things we could have dove in on. So thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Happy holidays to you, and everybody watching. Happy holidays. Thank you so much.